welcome to today's episode of Life Coaching for Dance Studio Owners. I'm excited today to have the lovely Darla Lemay here, and she has experience in running her studio for 43 years, which is absolutely incredible. And unique is that her studio is a nonprofit. And so I really wanted to share this information. I know I get a lot of questions where people are asking about nonprofits and how they work, and I'm sure that we'll uncover that in today's conversation. Before we get started, could you introduce yourself a little bit to us, Darla?
Well, thank you for asking me to be a part of this. My name is Darla Lemay, and I am the artistic director, executive director, kind of all the hats of Stageworks Academy of the Performing Arts. We have been in business for 43 years. I have traveled lots to different parts of lots of the US to learn from all the people that many of your listeners go to, the Regolds, and I have done all of those kinds of training, all of that training. And we are also a performing arts school on top of a dance school. And we just opened up a fine arts play school. So that's kind of like we're really, really busy. I love the arts. I love seeing what kids are going to do next.
When you first started, was your studio nonprofit from the beginning, or did you make a shift after a few years?
No, this organization was a nonprofit. It was founded by a group of moms who wanted their children to have performing arts training. And they got together and they did all the paperwork to become a society. In Alberta, there's different kinds of nonprofits. And so our nonprofit is a society. And then they hired people and they started off as one kind of board, and we've evolved to a different kind of board. There's different kinds of boards that you could be as well. I have thoughts on those since we did start as one kind of board, which was an administrative board, because the parents were the key stakeholders and they were the people who governed the society. And so, but we did shift it as we evolved to become a bigger organization. We did shift to a policy board. And yeah, that's what we are today.
So that's really interesting. So my studio is a non-for-profit in New Jersey, and there's generally not different types of boards, but it's the structure is different where you have voting members or not voting members. So for us, like the Girl Scouts or Girl Guides would be something where they have the membership votes, like every member has a vote versus,
Mhm.
okay, it's just the board handling it and we're not opening it up to the wider membership. Um,
Right.
but I'm sure already anybody who doesn't have a familiarity with nonprofits is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how would you describe maybe a difference between how a nonprofit runs versus a for-profit studio in your words?
You're still accountable to your public, but I think the biggest difference is you have a community. Um, that the idea is that everybody works towards the betterment of the community. um Not one person, like I don't if I have 100 students, I get paid A, B, and whatever. If
Hmm.
I have 400 students, I still get paid the same amount.
Yeah.
So then you do your budgeting differently when it comes to that. I've only really known the nonprofit world, so I don't know really what it's like to be in the profit world.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes look at them though, and I go, oh man, if I only owned this business, wouldn't that be
Yeah.
wonderful? I have done that. But then on the flip side, I'm going, oh my gosh, thank God we're a nonprofit. With all of the COVID thing was a big, big deal that, as a nonprofit, I feel like I had more support than if,
Mm.
and not so much financial support, because I believe that the government had made available all the same things. But I felt like I had more support where I could go to my municipality, and the people who are in the community development you could help you as far as giving you advice, and this is coming down the pipe, and this, they could I feel I was getting more support that way, as more that a profit would have gotten. So that was a big deal. So I think that to me, that's like you're still accountable, but to your public. But when you're accountable to a community, then it's a little bit amped up more. I have to show my profits, my losses, why I do what I do. Yeah, so it is a bit more of a challenge that way.
For people who are considering opening a studio as a for-profit or nonprofit, what are some things that you would say should be things that they consider before they make a decision either way?
Well, like for me, it was the parents who initiated this. And so they were already on boards, like really engaged. And so
Mm.
they were willing to work, do whatever they had to do. More from a like not so much from a financial standpoint, which I'm sure they did contribute something, but more of a time thing, it's just you're starting a business just like everybody else. But you have more hands helping that business thrive. Whereas, I imagine a for profit, I mean, you're kind of a lone soldier unless you have like people who are helping you as far like other stakeholders, but you're kind of on your own. So um you can make your own decisions however you want, whereas if you are running a nonprofit, you just can't do that. You have to go through a process, and that sometimes can be really difficult. I would think like starting off, um if you have, like I said, a number of people who want that, that's the route to go,
Yeah.
not a studio owner or somebody who wants to have a studio and decide. I wouldn't do that because it's you could run something, open something that's your heart and soul that could down the road be taken away from you. And that's where really people don't think about that kind of stuff. Like it really, you've got to think about your bylaws and you got to protect yourself. And, they just don't think that you could have the wrong people in your governing, like on your board, and they could really make your life very difficult. So
Yeah.
you got to think about those things. So to start off with, I would like you just have to have a heart for community, and you have to be able to recognize that there's going to be processes involved, that you won't make all the decisions solely on your own.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, some things that I think that people don't realize are anytime you have a board, including a for-profit, because
Mhm.
everyone remembers Steve Jobs was fired from Apple Computers, the company he
Mhm.
started, right? Because the board
Yes.
kicked him out. It's important to have, I would say, a good sense of who your board members are in terms of bringing a variety of skill sets to the table. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it can't just be your family members.
Mm-mm.
You could start a LLC and it's just like, oh, okay, I've got family members or a partnership and it's your sister or something. But it's different with a
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit in that no, make sure you have people with some legal knowledge. You have people who love the arts. They buy into the mission.
Yes.
Um, I think for me, one of the things that kind of helped set things up to be successful was, as you were mentioning, like having your bylaws figured out, having your
Mhm.
processes. How do you vote? How do you decide on salaries? Things like that. Budgeting. Those are areas where studio owners struggle because they can just start a business like that and
Yes.
they didn't have to file all that paperwork and get it all together. But
Mm-hmm.
when you have something where it's an open book, anyone in the public can see it.
Yeah.
Um, there's a different sense of responsibility to the greater good or the community, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That for sure. You have so many eyes on the things that you're doing. And that could be good. Like I don't want to scare people if this is really where their heart is, but you really got to have your heart there for that kind of community place, and not because it is in some ways, like I said, I have looked at the for profit, and I'm like, oh, if I could just like, if I could just tell that parent to go, or if I could just like, you know, decide, how and what shows and what like, if I could just make all those decisions without thinking about all the other levels of who is that affecting? How are we going to get that together? Do we have the money for that? Like sometimes I do look at that. But then when we're in times of trouble where a parent has really caused a lot of problems, I can go to my board and say, listen, this person is acting inappropriate. This person is affecting the students, they're affecting our operation. And then the board can get involved.
Yeah.
And then the board coming, if you're a parent who's losing, who's in a time of crises, a formality of a board coming to you really does change it, as opposed to a director who's just, or owner. It's like, well, of course you want to solve this. You just want to take my money. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? They
Yeah.
just have a different, where the board comes in and it's just a very different, it's just more professional. The T's are
Yeah.
crossed, the I's are dotted, and then you can, and then the person usually either decides to leave, or they just pull back and they're not as aggressive then.
So, how often does your board meet? Like what does that look like for your organization?
For our organization, like, and again, your bylaws would dictate how you want to do that. So
Yeah.
go through all of those details, what's important to you. Our board meets 9 times in the year.
Okay.
And again, our board is now a policy board. So when you were talking earlier about, like, we were talking about administrative, they kind of generally go administrative, a policy, or a combination of both. And so for us, or it could be an advisory board even. But for us, we started administrative, which meant the parents did all the legwork. They did the publicity, they did the fundraising, they did all of those. They did all the work that a hired staff member would do.
Right.
And then as time got started going and we started getting bigger, then they hired staff. But what happened was you've got this conflict all the time because you have turnovers in the board. In the beginning, it used to be like whoever wanted to be on the board could be on the board. If you're
Mm.
a parent of the society, we want you on the board. But what that really created was a conflict between your director, who had all the experience of running a business, running an arts organization, was into the dance community, understood that, and you're kind of like bashing heads a little bit. So the parents, they're coming from my child, what's good for my child. It's very hard for them to be objective beyond what their child's needs were. And then it just was like, and they turn over. So then what would happen is, like, we would run the school this way, and then a new president would come in and they would say, our priority is not contemporary dance. Our priority is hip hop. And then we
Yeah.
would go, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, and then, so this is kind of what was happening. It wasn't, and eventually it had to change. Things had to change because we were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Our personnel were much more skilled and much more educated, and the board was still parents. and
Yeah.
and not that parents are not capable.
Right.
They just didn't have the background that we as staff had. And so then we had to change the board to a policy board. So basically, when it changed, then it was like, hey, we're looking for an accountant. We're looking for somebody who understands governance. We're looking for somebody who's great with the public, really engaging the public. And, because you need them, you need
Yeah.
their support, or you can't operate really. We ended up doing that. And now our board is just beautiful. Like, it's just,
Mm.
they're very professional. They're all about the policy. They're all about staying in their lane versus your lane, because that
Right.
can happen a lot on nonprofits. Um, but being there for you, understanding this is our goal. This mission has been in place for a long time. It is discussed every year. Is this what we still stand for? And understanding that and being supportive instead of like having their own agendas, because that can happen too. I've been there, done that. So,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I don't know, that's how our board operates, and it's been the most effective this way.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It really makes sense when you think about kind of the life cycle of an organization going from people who are close to the work,
Hmm.
and then slowly, all right, we're gonna have more people who are paid staff coming on board to do things and how that shift can happen. You've probably kind of seen your organization kind of go through different stages.
Hmm.
What stage would you say, how would you describe where you're at now at 43 years?
Um, we're really working cohesively. Like, they are very respectful. Our board is small. They've
Yeah,
decided that we don't need to have just a warm body in the seat. We want to look for people who really believe in the mission and want to grow the organization. And so they kind of what I always say to them is I will manage my staff and you manage to the president and you manage your board. And so then because we've made it this way, I come to the table with, okay, the day-to-days, this is what's happening, this is what I think our direction should be, these are the conflicts, these are the challenges. And then they come to the table with, okay, so how are you going to make this happen? How are you going to make that happen? And then do you need anything from us?
right,
That's what they come to the table with. And that is so refreshing to me because I know I could go to them with these challenges and I know that I don't have to look like I have it all together all of the
right.
time. That they have my back 100%. When there's a conflict, again, most of our conflicts as studio owners are with parents. And so when a parent comes at, and sometimes they can be extremely aggressive. And when they come at you, like I said, they are on my side 100%. I never feel like they're like, okay, well, we have to listen to the parent and we have to make a determination. They don't really come like that. They go, you're our director. We have your back. Okay, tell us what happened and how can we help you more?
Yeah,
That's really, really important as a studio owner. Um, but yeah, I think that they've just learned and they've been very specific in their vetting. Like it's vetting? I think it's
yeah,
vetting.
yeah,
Oh my God, thank you. They've been very specific as to who's going to sit, and they've gone through a process of even recruitment. They have an application that the board has to fill out, and they've never been like that before. They've always like sort of like whatever warm body was in the room because we have to fill a position. And
yeah,
we found that does just is not effective. Then going through this process of like meeting and then meeting the potential candidate. And we don't have to have 100 board members.
right.
We have 5,
Yeah,
and that's perfect. Yeah.
yeah. On the staff side, do you have other people in leadership along with you? Or is it like all the faculty report to you? How does that work for you?
I'm the director. I'm the one that's accountable to the board of directors. The rest of my staff are not. They're accountable to me. And so we kind of split up our operation in that I take on like 40% of the supervision, and then I have like um, a director that does the dance department, and then I have another director that does the preschool dance department, and then I take on actually the theater. In our case, we have a theater program. I take on the theater department as well, so that's why I have that 40% and they have 30 and 30.
Yeah,
And then from there, all of our teachers are all contracted. They're all accountable. They work with the 2 directors, but they're accountable to me. I sign the contracts because I have signing authority. My other 2 directors don't have signing authority. And so because of all of those, I would be the one that is accountable to the government in any way, labor standards, all of those types of things. So yeah, that's how our breakdown goes.
when you had the different departments, when did that kind of come into play? Like, was that from the beginning you had them set up in departments? When did you feel the need for that?
Actually, this last year, this is brand new and it has worked beautifully.
Yeah,
I have for years been the person has wears all the hats and like every hat, which I know all of you out there, how many hours do you spend on a recital? How many, like, it's just too
yeah,
much.
yeah,
But in our world, like, and probably a for profit, like the owner is the person. And
yeah,
so at some point, you have to delegate those responsibilities. And also like different than an owner. at some point I have to retire,
Yeah.
and then somebody else has to come into my place. And
Yeah.
so I think it would be I have been dedicated a lot of time to running this organization. The last thing I want it to do is to not continue to flourish because I'm not in the leader
Right.
chair anymore. So that's a big difference from being an owner, in that you might have family that you give the business your business to, or you decide to sell your business. Like, it's so different that way. This organization is going to continue to run, but I would not be in the seat. And so it was really important for me to kind of train up the next generation of leaders. And that has started. I just thought, I don't want to do all the work all of the time and have all the
Right.
responsibility and all the headaches and all the stress. I want to, you know, start list. And then also, like, a younger generation, they do things differently. They understand the parents more than I do because
Yeah.
I'm the grandma, and we do things differently than they do. And so that's kind of what initiated all of this kind of thing. And I've had people say in the past, "Oh, you're so lucky you run a nonprofit because then you can just walk away whenever you can." But that it isn't as
No.
easy as that, because your heart and soul is into this.
Yeah.
You do have, you're never looking. I never look at things like, how much money am I going to make? I
Right.
never look at things. I go in, how much money do I have to make in order to pay those bills?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But so it's so different. I'm not coming from this sole entrepreneur, but I have the responsibility of that entrepreneur. It's not as easy to just walk away and cut,
Yeah.
like, whatever happens happens. It just doesn't work like that for me. So, yeah.
When we were talking before we started recording, we were talking about how sometimes people are exploring becoming a nonprofit organization because they're struggling for finances. They're having a hard time getting their budget balanced, and they see the allure of, oh, there's grants and I can do this and
Mhm.
I could apply for government grants or private companies and things. How would you respond to that?
I think that's the wrong reason, 100%. I don't want to judge anybody out there. If that's where you want to give that a go and try it, I wish you the best. I think that it is a very slippery slope. I feel like the grants are really attached to your government in lots of ways. If your government loves social programming, if your government loves the arts, you're going to see they're going to put money into those programs, and then you might get something. But I can't tell you how many grants I fill out and how
Yeah,
many I actually get.
same.
If I filled out 5 major grants, I probably have got one that I keep getting every single year, which I barely even have to fill
Yeah,
out because it's just something that I have gotten since day one. But the others, no way. Your program doesn't meet our guidelines. Your program isn't good enough. Your program, blah, blah, blah. And you spend hours and hours and hours doing these kinds of things. So grants are great if they work, but I think it's not a good model to, like, when I do my budgeting, I budget the grant, like the one grant that we get all the time. I budget that grant in, but I never know how much I'm actually going to get. I've had where I've received, up to $80,000 from this one grant. And I was like, are you kidding me? How did we get $80,000? That's insane. And then the next year I got 10.
mm.
So, like,
You
you
can't
can't
count on
think,
it.
right, you can't count on them, because and then these are hard times right now. So the governments have other people they have to look at. And my fear is that we may not get grants. So it's like, when you're running I run this organization like the dance owners would run their business. I got to have tuition. I've got to have show revenue.
Yeah,
And I have to be able to pay for the bills.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so when you talk about that, we were talking a little bit about budgeting and figuring out money and things like that. I know a lot of people, regardless of how their studio is structured, they kind of feel cringy when it comes to raising prices,
Yeah.
or getting more proceeds from costumes or performances.
Hmm.
What would you kind of offer as some wisdom around that?
Well, I've done like I said, I have done lots of training with all of the different conferences, and I've heard some really good mentors that have been a part of those conferences.
Right.
And it's I raise my fees every single year. Just because I'm a nonprofit doesn't mean I don't, like I said, run it like it's a business. I
Right.
have responsibilities. I have to pay people. I have to make sure that, I'm accountable to the board. I say I'm going to raise money through tuitions. I say I'm going to raise money through costumes, through production revenue, all of these ways, special camps. I do all the same as an owner does, but I'm accountable to those people because they say, Darla, you have to make, like, how much money are we going to make? Because they are responsible for the money.
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for the money. I'm accountable for my job, but I'm not responsible for the money. The board of directors is. So you have to think in terms, you've got to be careful of staff. You got to make sure you're following rules because they're going to tell you. So I raise money in every area that I can. And just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you don't have the responsibility of making sure your organization continues to run. And I and I know you're in the arts, you're working with children, and everybody, for whatever reason, thinks you should do everything for free, and I don't do anything for
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
So I think, but I've learned that through these conferences. Raise your, even if it's $1,
Yeah.
raise it, because 5 years down the road, if you haven't raised it, now you're raising it $5, and that's a bigger deal. So it's, yeah, I everything makes money.
Yeah.
Maybe not much, but it does make money. Yeah.
So shifting gears, you mentioned that you have a preschool dance department separate from your dance department.
Hmm.
What kind of led to that decision to have them as two separate departments?
I think it's recognizing the needs of the students and the needs of the parents. Um, I feel like we had to do, I don't think this is news to anybody, like, especially people who have been doing this for a really long time. Everybody's different. Today's different than it was, 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Even before COVID, I would even, would say everybody is very different. How they communicate, and we just found like we needed to really, when you're dealing with preschoolers, you're dealing with a different kinds of challenges with a
Yeah.
student versus like an older student. But also you have, like, often this is the very first thing that parents are putting their children in. So the parents themselves are kind of walking into a world they know nothing about. And you have to take the time and, to kind of teach them what the world, what this is all about. The performance. We just had a performance. You have your seasoned dance parents, and they're like, yeah, I'll pick you up at the lobby. Then you've got your preschool, and they're like, where do I pick them up? Can I
Yeah.
come backstage? Can I go, and they're so different, and trying to educate them on, this is the way it is, in the world. You can't go backstage because you're causing chaos
Right.
backstage. So, just little things like that. We just felt that they needed to have a specialist that would sit and look at that, and that person makes sure that the kids are taken care of, making sure that if you do special things, like we do a spring fling, that's not for everybody. That's just for the preschoolers, and inviting the parents in, and let's have some treats, and let's celebrate them in springtime, or things like that. We just have found we don't treat them the same as our other students.
Yeah.
They have a different attention.
Yeah. It sounds like you're being really intentional about their experience, and nurturing them at that young age. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, like I was saying to you earlier, there's a lot of competition as far as what kids could do. There's so many things kids can do. And you often see like a parent when they get really anxious, it's usually because they don't understand something or we're not communicating in the same way. Gone are the days where we just, email a newsletter and
Oh yeah.
it's right. Like they're, and I thought about this the other day. It's like these parents, like they get all this information from so many different sources and they just don't know. They just don't know. They're tired.
Right.
There's a lot. And it's like, yeah, they just don't communicate in the same way. Communication, I think, mostly is it's the bane. It's that, it's that
Yes.
center that, oh my gosh, everything seems to fall around communication. So I think we have like amped up our communication as far as trying really hard to spread the message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up today's
Mhm.
episode, what would you offer as, I would say, your favorite tip to a studio owner who's kind of feeling overworked? They're
Mhm.
not really delegating to their staff. They just have teachers and maybe an office person, but they're not truly delegating some of the things that they're responsible for.
Mhm.
Um, so if you have any parting words of wisdom for them.
Well, um, hmm. I think that would be the same whether you're a nonprofit or a profit. I think if you're thinking of the nonprofit, really think hard. It is awesome. I love it. It for sure. But I want to just like be in that for the right reasons. Like you want a community of people to help you run the thing that you have your heart and soul for, but know that at some point there's an exit door.
Yeah.
Um, for everybody else, like, I'm like everybody else. I'm at home at 10 o'clock at night and the house is quiet and I'm typing up things I'm going to do. I'm like, I really run the studio just like I own the studio.
Yeah.
The reality is, at some point, I've got to walk away. And so that is not easy, but I would say you do have to listen to what these conference people tell you. It's like, take time for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just like I have a 24-hour rule that when a parent messages me all mad, I wait 24 hours before even respond because I feel like they're reacting and then it's not going to do anybody any good if I'm reacting.
Right.
So I wait 24 hours. I don't care what it is, unless it's like somebody is like, needs help as far as health, police or something. I give myself 24 hours to respond because then I'm calm and I'm not taking what they're saying personal. And often I'll contact and say, hey, I see that you had, and they've calmed down too. And so we're resolving something when everybody is calm. But I also have the 24-hour rule in that if somebody needs help, you don't wait 3 days to contact them back to give them that help. You give them 24 hours and then you contact them
Right.
to make sure that they are actually hearing that. Um, yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you have the right team. So pick your right team. People who you trust, people who don't have a personal agenda, people who understand the roles and that you have to play in that I am solely responsible. Whether or not I do all the work is a different situation, but I am solely responsible. So you need to have staff that recognize that what they do puts me in jeopardy. If they do something that is inappropriate, that puts me at jeopardy because I have to answer for that. So and then I might receive pressure from a board saying that's inappropriate. We cannot have staff like that. And then I have to let them go. Do you know what I mean? It's like so understanding that there is, you know, you can't be solely on your own.
Yeah.
You have to have a team. I recognize the older I get, the more I understand that. Have a good team. let yourself have a day off. Let your, yeah. What I care about today is not what I cared about so many years ago.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
it's very, very, and I don't have the energy today that I had that many years ago, but I still have that same responsibility. So that's like where you've got to make some shift and be okay with making shifts. If this isn't working, okay, tried it, been there, done that. Let's move on. Let's try something else.
Right.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful thing. I love the sense of community. I love when everybody is working together for the same goal. I just love that kind of stuff. My most favorite thing and the worst thing is when we pack everything up and go to a theater. First of all, it's a lot of work, but when everybody is buzzing, and I don't know what it is about that. I just have such a sense of community, and I just love that we're all doing this for the kids, and we're all doing this like so that they live their best life. They shouldn't have any worries but to go on that stage and be the best. And the parents shouldn't have any worries than going into that audience. And they've done enough. They've paid for everything. They have got their child there. They have dried up tears, and they should be able to come to a show and just sit there and chill out and be there for them. And I said yesterday, we had our dance show, and I said, okay, just because this isn't a competition doesn't mean this is not important. This is your way to thank the parents that are your parents that are sitting in that audience. Thank you for allowing me to do what I love the most. And the kids just like brightened up, and they
Yeah.
were all about the parents, and so um yeah, that I don't know if that's helpful for anybody. I don't think I've said anything like crazy
Yeah.
that but this is a beautiful world we're in. I love this world, and I'm very lucky that I get to do it.
Absolutely. So if people want to learn more about you, where can they find you online?
Well, I am on Stageworks Academy. They can go there. They can email me if they want to, Darla at stageworksacademy.com. I'd love to help anybody out. I can tell you all the nightmares that we haven't discussed and all the things when you're at the end of your career, which I
Yeah.
am. It's sort of like you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe we got through this and we got through that. And it's like, yeah, it's like I can help anybody sort of steer them into this is human nature. We might all be, we might technically do things differently, but human nature is still human nature. People
Right.
feel still the way they feel. And so how to, and you have people who are type A personalities, and when they go into projects, they go fully in, and sometimes that can cause a conflict. So how to kind of navigate that as well. But most importantly, if you're considering changing from a for-profit to a nonprofit, you know, you just have to go down that real, you know, that deep dive and to figure out why you want to do that. But
Yeah.
if it's for financial reasons, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
It'll cause you more grief than you will want,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, thank you so much for being on today's episode. I'm going to also put the link to her website in the show notes so
Mhm.
you guys can check it out. And oh my gosh, what an honor to have you today and
Oh,
learn from you. And everyone, thank you. We will talk to you next week.
thank you.